Finally, the 20-man roster for the March Olympic qualifiers has been released. We have some U.S. men's soccer games that actually have consequences, some games that matter. There's some interesting things on this roster as always. The players that left off are probably the most interesting part about the roster. Let's get into it right now. What's up? My name is Sam. Welcome to the Yank Report, the show where we talk about the U.S. men's national team and all things involved in that. And if you're into that kind of thing, please hit the subscribe button. We'd love to see you again. And please hit the like button. It helps more people see the video. Really helps out the channel. Let's get right into this roster. First things first, we have the goalkeepers, and Jason Kreis was required to bring 3 goalkeepers on this roster, and those goalkeepers will be Matt Freese, JT Marcinkowski, and David Ochoa, and those are the 3 goalkeepers everybody was expecting. Now, the interesting thing is who will start. Everybody's expecting Marcinkowski to be the guy. He's the guy with the most experience. Now, in the presser following the release of this roster, Jason Kreis said the competition at goalkeeper is tighter than a lot of people think. He didn't give any names, but he kind of alluded to the idea that maybe David Ochoa is a lot closer than we think to getting some games here. It would be really a big thing for Ochoa to get some games over Marcinkowski because Marcinkowski, he's 23 years old. He has a lot more experience. Ochoa, 20 years old, doesn't have a lot of professional experience at all. It would be a big statement that Ochoa has passed up Marcinkowski, or at least has closed the gap. It would show us that maybe David Ochoa is close to fulfilling that potential that everybody sees in him, that excitement that everybody has for him. That's a big storyline that we're going to see unfold as the tournament goes on. Moving on to the defenders, and we have Julian Araujo, Justin Glad, Aaron Herrera, Henry Kessler, Mauricio Pineda, and Sam Vines. This is more or less what we thought we'd see from the defenders as well. The interesting battle here, as I said in the previous video about the U.S. Olympic roster, is going to be at right back. It's similar to the goalkeeper situation. It's going to be the right back situation between Julian Araujo and Aaron Herrera. Julian Araujo is a 19-year-old right back for LA Galaxy. Araujo is a very talented player. He's a player that whenever I did my most talented teenagers video, a lot of people said Araujo should have been listed at number 10. Araujo is the player that I hope to see starting in the right back position, but that means he would have had to beat out Aaron Herrera, and Aaron Herrera at 23 years old is a much older, much more experienced player. Herrera is a player that's gotten a cap under Greg Berhalter. He's a competent defender. He can play right back and left back. I think it would be a big statement if Julian Araujo can keep Aaron Herrera on the bench and show that Jason Kreis can put his faith in the 19-year-old and choose Araujo over Herrera. And at center back, Pineda's probably going to get some starts because he's the most technical center back of the group, but of the other two, I can see it going either way. I could see it being a rotation situation. I don't know. There's one of the things about this roster is we just haven't seen these guys play together before. We've seen them play individually, but never as a unit. So there's so many question marks up and down this roster about how it will actually line up. Speaking of question marks, the midfield is where everybody is asking questions. The midfield will be Johnny Cardoso, Hassani Dotson, Ulises Yanez, Jordi Mihailovic, Andres Pereira, Sebastian Saucedo, and Jackson Ewell. Now, when this roster was dropped, or actually when this roster was leaked, the big thing that everybody had to say was, where is Tanner Tessman? Where is Cole Bassett? Where's the creativity going to come from? Who's going to be the ball-carrying midfielder? It seems like this is going to be a very defensive midfield. You'll likely see Jackson Ewell, Johnny Cardoso, and maybe Jordi Mihailovic. It's going to be really interesting to see how this midfield actually sets up. Jason Kreis has gotten heavily criticized on Twitter by U.S. men's national team fans for his selection. Now, one interesting thing to note is I did watch the press conference where Jason Kreis talked about this roster selection, and he was asked, why is it that Jordi Mihailovic and Ulises Yanez were listed as forwards in the first roster but are now listed as midfielders? And he said, I'm not going to answer that question. That's actually a secret or something like that. He alluded to this idea that that's something important to the roster. So I'm assuming that one of these guys is going to be a midfielder, even though we expected him to play out wide, or maybe it reflects the formation that the team is going to use or how it's going to line up. It was a really interesting comment. Moving on to the forwards, we have Jesus Ferreira, Jonathan Lewis, Benji Michel, and Sebastian Soto. You know, one player that I talked a lot about whenever the preliminary roster came out was Ricardo Pepi. I was interested to see, you know, I believe he's 18 years old, if he's ready to turn the corner and show that he's better than some of the older prospects, even though he's one of the youngest players called into this team, and he was not one of the ones that made the cut. So we're still waiting to see it from Pepi. Now, Jason Christ did have some very high praise for Jesus Ferreira and said he's exactly the way that we want the number 9 to play. So because of the strength of those comments, I would expect Jesus Ferreira to be the 9 for this team. We know Sebastian Soto is a poacher. He's a guy that just gets goals every time he's on the field, but judging by the press conference, it sounds like Ferreira's ahead of Soto right now in Jason Christ's mind. Although, man, it's a huge question mark. We just don't know how this team is going to line up. We don't know how Christ wants them to play. There's just a lot of uncertainty. And, one of the big issues with that is we're playing against some teams in Costa Rica and Mexico. Costa Rica is going to be up first. A lot of players that were called into the Costa Rican team play on the same team in the Costa Rican league. So they have some cohesion built in. That, and they're in the middle of their season right now. So a lot of these players on the American roster are MLS players, or at least players on European squads that weren't getting a lot of playing time, like Ulysses Yanez has hardly played at all in the last couple of years. So we have a lot of out-of-form MLS players trying to get in shape and figure out each other for this game, and we're going up against a Costa Rica team that's used to playing with each other week in, week out. Now that sounds like a recipe for a dangerous conclusion for the U.S. men's national team. And then we're going to have to go up against a Mexico team that looks like maybe like an A-, B+-ish Mexican national team. They have almost all the U23 players you'd want to bring in, so that looks like a scary team to take on. Now, the reality of the situation is we have the second most talented roster going into this qualification tournament behind Mexico. On paper, we've got better players in this Costa Rican team that we're going up against. Now, like I said, the question is, we're a team that's getting thrown together. This is a team that's been playing together in this camp for the last couple of weeks, and we just got to hope that Jason Christ can put it together, that he and Greg Berhalter have figured it out, and that they're going to get this team into shape and get them ready to qualify for the Olympics. But we are going to go up against a Costa Rica team that is likely a lot more familiar and a lot more drilled and a lot more in season than we are. That Costa Rica game is going to be a must win because right after that we got to play Mexico, and that Mexico team looks a little bit intimidating. We don't want to be in a situation where the Mexico game is a must win. Now, I'm not saying that it's all gloom and doom. I'm just saying, guys, be careful. Don't write off that Costa Rica game as an easy win. It's going to be a lot more difficult than we think. Now, all that being said, I am excited for these upcoming fixtures. Like I said in the beginning, this is one of the first competitive competitions that U.S. soccer has been involved with for, I don't know, it's been a long time. And there are going to be a lot of players on display that may ultimately factor into the national team. Sam Vines, of course, might be our backup left back at the moment. Jackson Ewell and Johnny Cardoso are both midfielders that have spent time with the senior team. Jackson Ewell, we've seen a lot of. We know what he can do. He's a great distributor of the ball. Whenever he has time and space, he's able to pinpoint passes, play beautiful balls. One of the best diagonal passers in the pool, but he is a little shaky on defense. I don't know if that'll be an issue in this tournament, but it is something that we see at the highest levels. Johnny Cardoso is a player that we don't get to see a whole lot because he plays in the Brazilian league. It's going to be interesting to see, is he going to be playing as an 8? Is he going to be playing as a dual 6? How does that translate? What kind of impact? Is he going to be a player that's going to add some creativity to this roster? Like we said, it just doesn't have a ton of creativity. Johnny Cardoso is a player that with a great tournament here could see his national team profile rise tremendously. And then up top, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens between Sebastian Soto and Jesus Ferreira. I know that there's a lot of people out there who are big Sebastian Soto fans who think that he should deserve a shot to maybe be the senior team striker. Now, Jesus Ferreira does not have as much momentum with the fan base, but has been effective pretty much every time he's played. And the way that Jason Christ talked about him in the press conference, it makes it sound like Jesus Ferreira is actually ahead in the striker battle right now. So Jesus Ferreira is another player that could see himself throwing his name in the hat for the striker mix, even though Josh Sargent and Matthew Hoppe and Daryl DK seem to be having fantastic moments right now in Europe. But Jesus Ferreira is a guy that with a big tournament can throw himself right in that ring. So there it is. There is your Olympic roster breakdown. I'm looking forward to watching these games. We haven't seen competitive matches in a long time. Even though this isn't the sexy U23 roster we were all hoping for. You know, it is what it is. I guess we just got to take what we get. What are you interested to see in these Olympic qualifiers? Do you think that this team is able to qualify? Are you just really upset about Bassett and maybe Caden Clark and maybe Tanner Tessman? Let me know your thoughts. As always, my name is Sam, and this is the Yank Report.